It felt so good. Those were her exact words, drifting down the hallway like a trail of perfume. At first, I thought I was imagining things. Maybe it was a TV show. Maybe she was on the phone with a friend, sharing some silly story. But no. The sentence came out of her mouth. Clear. Warm. Almost triumphant. I stood there, half concealed by the edge of the wall, my shoulders tense, my breath caught in my throat. And then I heard her laugh. Soft, reminiscent, private. I should have turned around and walked away. But I stayed, paralyzed, listening to her describe a moment of intimacy, her first time with someone else. The words were quiet, halting, threaded with subdued excitement. She didn't give me a name, not in that snippet I overheard. She didn't even say first time. All she said was how new it felt, how electrifying it was to let go, how afterward she sat there trembling, wondering if life would ever be the same. And the worst part, the unmistakable delight in her voice, like she was savoring the memory. I'd never heard that tone from her before, not exactly like that, and it cut into my chest. She spoke as though she was confiding in a trusted confidant, someone who'd understand how that moment changed her. I knew my wife had a past. Hell, I had one too. But hearing the intimate details of her earliest sexual experience, hearing how she relished every second, that hammered into me a sudden, raw jealousy that I couldn't fully explain, not even to myself. I wanted to confront her. I wanted to step into the room, ask who she was talking to, demand to know more. Instead, I went to the bathroom, turned on the faucet, and stared at myself in the mirror. I tried to push away the tension in my back, tried to breathe. My lower ribs ached in a way that had become alarmingly familiar. Physical pain that came from nowhere. Stress, maybe. Or maybe I'd pulled a muscle last weekend cleaning the garage. I didn't know. I turned the faucet off but left the bathroom light on, because the darkness around me suddenly felt bigger than the house itself. Her name is Amelia. I've called her Amy since the day I met her. She's my wife. We've been married for 10 years. She's never had a problem talking about sex. In fact, one of the things I loved about her from the start was how open she was, about everything. Her feelings, her desires, her stories. But that night, something in her voice made me feel like an outsider, like she was reliving a forbidden piece of her life, and I was intruding just by existing. It felt so good, I repeated silently, watching my reflection, letting the words swirl in my mind. A chill crawled across my shoulders. I tried to roll my neck, but my muscles were rigid. I should have let it go. Should have chalked it up to old memories. But I'd learned that sometimes what we overhear, those stray bits of conversation, can be the seeds of suspicion that grow wild in the dark. And that's when everything started. The cracks in the bedrock of our marriage, the slow unraveling of trust, the silent expansions of distance between us. Because if I was honest, I felt that distance well before I heard her say that phrase. I'd seen the subtle changes, her phone angled away from me, her eyes flicking toward it at random moments, the forced smiles she gave me. Then came the dryness in her laughter, the delays in her responses when I asked how was work, or you want takeout tonight. I didn't speak of it. Instead, I tried to fix it the only way I knew how, playing the good husband. Bringing home groceries without her asking, massaging her shoulders when she looked tired. My tension knotted deeper, yes, but I masked it with forced cheer, because I couldn't stand the idea of losing her. Not after all we'd built. Then John showed up. He came to the front door late one evening, with a bottle of bourbon dangling from his left hand and dried blood under his nostrils. John had been my buddy since high school. We used to skip classes together, sneak cigarettes behind the bleachers. We parted ways after graduation, but years later, we found ourselves living in the same city. Over time, we built up a comfortable friendship. He and his wife lived across town. Well, until that night he showed up, apparently thrown out by his spouse. He looked wrecked. Nose swollen, left cheek bruised, tears glistening in the corners of his eyes. "I've got nowhere to go," he said. "Mind if I crash on your couch for a couple nights? I promise I won't be a burden." His voice was shot, hoarse. I looked over his shoulder to the driveway, half expecting to see a second figure. But he came alone. My chest felt tight at the sight of my old friend addered like that. I glanced over to see Amelia behind me, biting her lip, her eyes wide with concern. "Sure," I replied. "Come in. You need an ice pack or something." He just shook his head, walked in with an awkward limp. I didn't press. I figured we'd talk about it later, maybe in private, if he was up for it. I set him up in the living room, handed him a pillow and a blanket, and stepped away to let him settle. But something caught my eye before I left him to rest. Amelia lingered. She stood on the other side of the couch, rubbing her arms like she was cold. And there was this fleeting expression on her face, soft, almost affectionate, the kind of look you give someone you're truly worried about. I remember thinking, that's normal, right? She's known him for years too. She's just concerned. That's all it is. Still, my chest felt that slow, gnawing ache as I headed upstairs. A day passed. I saw Amelia and John share moments of light laughter in the kitchen. I spotted them at breakfast, talking in hushed tones, pausing whenever I entered. I shrugged it off. They'd always gotten along. He was my best friend. He was used to dropping by, used to seeing her. She was used to joking around with him. It made sense, but then I noticed how John's eyes traveled over her when she wasn't looking, focused on her neck, the curve of her collarbone when she was sweeping her hair off her shoulders. I'd stand in the hallway, trying not to stare, feeling that prickling sensation at the base of my spine. And I caught it more than once, his gaze, locked on her. It shouldn't have set my nerves on fire the way it did. But it did, because everything in me was screaming that something was off. One evening, I came home from work later than usual. A headache pulsed behind my eyes. My entire body hummed with that now familiar pain in my ribs, as if someone had jabbed me there hours ago, and I couldn't shake it. I wanted just a quiet night, a decent meal, maybe an early bedtime. Instead, I walked in and saw Amelia in the kitchen with John. He was leaning on the counter. She had a glass of wine in her hand, swirling the red liquid around as she spoke. They glanced at each other with a fleeting intensity that made my jaw tighten. Amelia caught sight of me, and her face reset, like shutters closing. She forced a smile. John straightened up, cleared his throat. The tension in the air was palpable, and a chill ran through me. "Hey," I said, dumping my keys onto the table. "How's everyone doing?" "Great," Amelia replied, too quickly. I was just telling John about that new HR project at work. He nodded, raising the bottle of bourbon in a mock salute. "Yeah, big changes in her office, apparently." "Sounds interesting." I tried to keep my tone casual. "I'm gonna jump in the shower." I turned away before they could see the flicker of betrayal in my eyes. My heart hammered. My ribs throbbed. It felt like every muscle in my body was winding up, like a spring that might snap. But the worst was yet to come. A few nights later, I found the note on her phone. I'd picked it up to order takeout. Figured I'd ask if she wanted sushi or Thai. She'd left it on the countertop, open to a notepad app. The screen was unlocked, and there was a single line. "Reminder, get condoms." Next to it was a little blue emoji. The same blue heart she'd used once in our shared shopping list a long time ago, when we planned one of our more adventurous nights. That memory was sweet until now. Now it felt like a punch to the gut. My chest tightened so hard I could barely inhale. I stared at that line, reading it again and again, the words drilling into my mind. My vision blurred. A raw, pounding pain flared in my ribs, strong enough to double me over the kitchen island. That's when John walked in. "You all right?" he asked, noticing me hunched there. I locked the phone screen, slowly stood up, turning so he couldn't see my face. My voice came out rough. "I'm fine. Just A stomach cramp. He hesitated. Need anything? No. I'm good. I couldn't look at him. I felt the blood boiling under my skin, a wave of fury and heartbreak that I was desperately trying to hide. The moment he left, I stuffed my fists into my pockets and clenched them until my knuckles burned. Because there it was, spelled out in black and white. Reminder, get condoms. My wife was planning something. And that something wasn't a playful night with me. After that, I became a silent observer in my own home. I was too enraged, too shocked to confront her outright. My body hurt more often, like the stress was eating me from the inside out. But I had to see it, had to confirm it. So I set up a kind of puppet theater, a performance that only I was aware of. Whenever they talked, I'd lurk in the background, pretending to read the mail or fiddle with my phone. I'd catch glimpses of Amelia's hand resting a second too long on John's forearm, or John leaning in close to whisper something. Then they'd go quiet if they noticed me. In bed, Amelia turned away from me. She'd say she was tired, busy, stressed. All the usual excuses. I'd lie awake, the ache in my ribs pulsing with my heartbeat, my mind spinning like a broken record. In the morning, I'd find them in the kitchen, exchanging small glances, half smiles, coded body language. I wanted to explode, to hurl accusations, but I held it in, swallowing the bitter taste of suspicion. One Saturday, about 2 weeks into John's stay, I pretended to go out for a jog. I laced up my sneakers, put on running shorts, and told Amelia I wanted some fresh air. She nodded a little too eagerly, like she was relieved I'd be gone. I walked down the driveway, turned the corner, waited until I was out of sight, then circled around the block to the back alley that led to the small rear entrance of our house. I'd installed that door for convenience, never realized I'd use it like a burglar. Quietly, I crept in. My heart hammered so violently I was sure they could hear it. The hallway was dim, the living room silent. But from the kitchen, I heard whispering. I slid closer, flattening myself against the wall, inch by inch. At first, I only heard hushed voices, then a gasp, then the unmistakable sound of lips meeting, a muffled moan that clawed at my nerves. I peeked around the corner just enough to see them. John's hands were on Amelia's waist, pulling her close. Her face was upturned, her eyes half closed, her lips parted against his. Her moan was soft, desperate. My vision blurred white with rage. My breath came in short, ragged bursts. My ribs ached so intensely I thought I might pass out. But I stayed silent, pressing my back against the wall, nails biting into my palms. They whispered something. I caught Amelia's voice, trembling. We can't. He'll be back soon. And John's answer, low. We have a few minutes. More kissing. I felt like my throat was on fire. I stepped away, heading for the stairs, each footstep somehow silent, even though inside I was howling. I wanted to confront them right then, wanted to grab John by the collar and smash his face into the counter. But something else took over, the cruelty of calm. I wouldn't let them see me lose it. I'd show them a face of absolute quiet. Because if I started yelling, I might never stop. I retreated to my car, reversing out of the driveway with a shaky hand on the steering wheel. My mind was a swarm of destructive impulses, each more vicious than the last. I wanted to drive somewhere and scream, or punch a hole in a wall. But what came was this eerie sort of emptiness. I felt myself shutting down, like a machine flipping its main switch. I parked by the old baseball field, stared at the deserted bleachers for a long time. Memories of playing catch with John flickered through my mind. Years ago, when we were just dumb kids with big dreams. That memory now felt like a rusted knife in my back. I pressed a hand to my ribs. They'd burned under the pressure. Time passed without me noticing. I thought about the note on Amelia's phone. I thought about her moan. I thought about that day in the hallway when I heard her say, "It felt so good," and I realized maybe it had never really been me that made her feel that way. Maybe she'd been replaying something from her past, or maybe something from the present. The humiliating confusion made my eyes sting. I wasn't ready to break the silence when I finally returned home, so I stayed quiet, barely speaking through dinner. Amelia asked if I was okay, and I forced a smile, answering with a quick, "Yeah, just tired." John avoided my eyes. That night, when I slipped into bed, my body shook with waves of pent-up rage and heartbreak. Amelia said nothing. She just turned off the bedside lamp, turned her back to me, and was asleep in minutes, or pretended to be. I spent the next couple of days in a fugue state, drifting around the house like a ghost, observing. My every movement felt robotic, measured. Whenever John and Amelia thought I was out, I'd lurk. I rarely heard them do more than whisper, but the tension between them was enough to set my nerves on edge. My physical pain worsened, radiating from my ribs to my spine. Twice, I locked myself in the bathroom, leaning over the sink, trying to push the pain down, to bury it. Part of me wanted to see a doctor, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. It was as though I needed that pain. I needed the tangible proof that something inside me was on the verge of collapse. Then the moment came, the final unveiling of their betrayal. I set it up. I told Amelia I was going to the gym. Told John he could have the living room to himself, watch the game, whatever. I took my gym bag, walked out the front door, and drove half a mile. Then I parked, circled back, slipped in through that back entrance. Like before, except this time, I was determined to witness it all, to not look away. I made my way upstairs, silent as a shadow. The bedroom door was open a crack, and I heard them. Whispered giggles, breathy kisses. I saw through the gap enough to confirm everything. John on my bed, his shirt tossed aside. Amelia straddling him, her hands in his hair, his lips on her neck. She leaned back, her eyes closed, that same desperate moan escaping her. The sight was so violently intimate I felt my stomach lurch. My heart pounded, and blood roared in my ears. 1,000 images stampeded through my mind. Our wedding day, her face shining with tears of joy. The times we'd made love in that same bed. The moment she told me she wanted kids someday. The memory of that note. Reminder, get condoms. Over and over, that note, that moan, that humiliating hush of a stolen moment. My chest constricted. My ribs flared with excruciating pain, so much so that I almost gasped aloud. I bit my tongue, tasting blood. Somehow, I found the will to stay quiet. Then I turned and walked away. Down the hall, down the stairs, out the door. I didn't shout. I didn't fling the door open to catch them in the act. I didn't want them to see me crumble. This, I realized, was the only power I had left. To choose how I would handle my discovery. I got into my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles whitened. My entire torso ached, and for a moment, I thought I might pass out from the sheer intensity of it. But I stayed awake, adrenaline spiking through my veins. Then, I drove. I drove with no plan, no destination. My thoughts a furious storm. Meters, blocks, miles. My phone buzzed once, probably Amelia. Maybe even John. I didn't check. I just kept going. My vision blurred from unshed tears, but I refused to let them fall. I would not cry. I was done crying. Aggressive calm took hold. I stopped at a deserted rest area off the highway. There was a battered vending machine near some picnic tables, a few tall pine trees overshadowing the place. I parked and got out, the cold wind biting my face. My body trembled as I paced back and forth, mind racing. The anger in me bubbled up, unstoppable. I lashed out at the vending machine, punching it. My fist exploded in pain, but I punched it again. Metal creaked. My knuckles stung, probably bleeding. But I didn't care. It was the only way I could release the avalanche of rage coursing through me. At some point, I pressed my forehead against the cold metal and stood there, panting, wincing from the ache in my ribs and the throbbing in my hand. The memory of Amelia on top of John seared into my mind. The quiet moans, the way her body curved, the realization that she'd wanted him there. She'd wanted that. And me. I was just a bystander in my own home. I'm not sure how long I spent in that empty rest area, wrestling with my own fury. But eventually I knew I had to do something. Something other than meltdown. Something other than cry. Revenge. The word flickered in my mind like a neon sign. Part of me recoiled, like, what am I, some petty sociopath? But another part of me whispered that I needed it, not because I wanted to see them suffer in some twisted, violent way, but because I needed to free myself from the agony that was gnawing at my insides, to tear out the poison they'd poured into my life. I clenched my injured fist, felt the slick warmth of blood on my knuckles. Then I got back in the car and drove home, never once turning on the radio. The silence was deafening, but I couldn't stand noise. It was late when I arrived. The house was dark. I stood in the driveway, looking up at the windows where the lights were off. My mind drifted to a single thought. They probably finished and drifted into separate rooms, or maybe they're lying together right now, making up some excuse for me. That image fanned the embers of my anger, but a new determination crystallized in me. I wasn't going to burst in and shout accusations. I wasn't going to beg for explanations. Instead, I'd leave them to rot in their lies. Let it devour them both from the inside out. That was my revenge. To vanish from their orbit without a single dramatic performance, to rob them of the satisfaction of seeing me broken. I entered the house quietly. I passed the living room, the couch with John's blanket strewn across it. I glimpsed an empty whiskey glass on the coffee table. My chest tightened with disgust. I made my way to the kitchen, where everything was eerily still. My footsteps echoed. If they heard me, they didn't come running. So I went upstairs. My bedroom door was closed. I didn't open it. I didn't want to see if he was in there or if she was alone. In my office, I rummaged through the desk drawers for a piece of stationery, the nice cream-colored kind Amelia once bought for thank-you notes. My hand shook as I took out a pen. But then, I stopped. Writing a note felt like giving them a piece of my heartbreak. Instead, I put it all back. No note. No goodbyes. I went to the closet, grabbed a duffel bag, and started packing clothes, just enough to get by for a while. A few shirts, a couple pairs of jeans, underwear, socks. I found an old jacket, stuffed it in. Then I took my laptop from the desk, my charger, the phone I used for work calls. I paused in the doorway, listening. Silence. My ribs still throbbed. My entire body trembled with a mixture of fury and heartbreak. But I forced one steady breath into my lungs, then another. Downstairs, I picked up my keys. I took one last glance around, remembering how many times I'd come home from work, and dropped my briefcase by the door, kissed Amelia's cheek, breathed in the familiar scent of coffee or dinner cooking. It all felt distant, unreal. I had the strangest urge to look back upstairs, to charge into that bedroom, yank John out of my bed, and break his nose all over again. But I didn't. Instead, I left. Quietly. Calmly. I sat behind the wheel, bag thrown in the passenger seat. For a second, I just stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My hair was damp with sweat, my eyes bloodshot. My fist was swollen, crusted with drying blood. And my lips curved into a grim, humorless smile. That was it. I started the engine, pulled out of the driveway, and drove into the night. I didn't even notice how cold it was until I realized I was shivering. My phone buzzed again, but I let it ring. I found a motel near the outskirts of town, the kind with flickering neon signs and a half-empty parking lot. The old clerk behind the counter gave me a bored look, probably noticing my battered hand, my haunted expression. He didn't ask questions. I paid cash, took a key, found my room. It smelled like stale cigarettes and cheap detergent, but I didn't care. I tossed my bag on the bed and locked the door behind me. Then I sank onto the edge of the mattress, and the ache in my ribs almost took my breath away. For a moment, I pressed my hand against my side, feeling the slow, molten throb. I let out a hiss, tears pricking the corners of my eyes. I inhaled, exhaled, forced my mind to find a calmer place. A wave of memory washed over me. Amelia's laughter when we moved into our house, the day we painted the walls ourselves and ended up smearing paint on each other like kids. John coming over with pizza and beer, helping us arrange furniture. The three of us so happy, so comfortable. I thought about that note on her phone. Reminder, get condoms. That was all it took to unravel everything. I stripped off my shirt, noticing in the mirror how the muscles in my back looked taut, how bruises seemed to bloom beneath my skin without me even remembering how I got them. Then I flicked off the lights and lay down on the stiff mattress, the darkness pressing in from all sides. Sleep came in disjointed intervals, broken by images of Amelia's hands on John, that moan in her throat, the memory of her first sexual experience. She once recounted so happily, how it felt so good. She used those same words with me once, but evidently she was sharing them again. By morning, my chest felt hollow, like I'd been scraped out. My knuckles burned, a dull reminder of last night's outburst. The pain in my ribs was still there, but a fraction lighter. Enough to let me breathe. I took a shower in the cheap, cramped bathroom, dressed in clean clothes, and stared at myself in the mirror for a long time. When I stepped outside, the sun was bright, mocking me. I stood by my car, squinting at the road, trying to decide what came next. I could vanish altogether. No phone calls, no explanations. Or I could talk to a lawyer, draw up separation papers. The word divorce echoed in my head, my stomach twisted. I wasn't prepared for that. Not yet. Then again, I wasn't prepared for any of this. I found a diner a few blocks away, ordered black coffee and toast. My appetite was non-existent. I sipped the coffee, ignoring how scalding hot it was, ignoring the way it tasted like burnt beans. An older man at the counter glanced at me, gave me a polite nod. Maybe he saw the turmoil on my face. Maybe he recognized it. I nodded back, my expression blank. It hit me then. The illusions in my life had been shattered, and that could set me free. No more pretending. No more second-guessing whether she was faithful, whether my best friend was truly my best friend. I'd soared past the point of illusions. I was living in raw, unfiltered reality now. But the rage still lingered. How do you let go of something like that? How do you pretend the betrayal never happened? A quiet voice in my mind told me I needed retribution. I needed them to feel the shock, the emptiness. But I also realized that might trap me in the same cycle of misery. If I wanted to be free, maybe the best revenge was not caring at all. I returned to the motel, turned my phone on. The screen lit up with missed calls, messages. I skimmed them. Amelia. Where are you? I'm worried. Please call me. John. Man, we need to talk. I'm sorry about everything. Please, let's work this out. I almost laughed. Work it out. Like we'd had a petty argument. I felt a cold numbness radiate through my chest. I typed a short text to Amelia. We're done. Don't call. Then I sent it, turned the phone off again, and slumped onto the bed. The next hour, I lay there, staring at the ceiling, letting the numbness settle. My heart still thundered, but at least now I had a direction, away from them. That evening, I took a drive through the edges of town, drifting past the places we used to frequent. A wave of bitterness rose up, but I pushed it down. My fists clenched on the wheel. I had to decide my next move. I had a job. I had responsibilities. I couldn't just vanish forever. And I didn't want to set foot in that house again, not while they were both there, building their silent alliance of shame. But a plan formed in my mind. I'd go back when they were out, clean up the last of my stuff. I'd talk to a lawyer, start the process. Maybe I'd even drive to my parents' place in Florida for a week, clear my head. something to buy time. That had to be enough. I ended up in the parking lot of a 24-hour gym, ironically the same chain I used to belong to before life got busy. I went in, flashed an old membership card. The bored teenager at the desk waved me through without much fuss. And for the next 2 hours, I unleashed every ounce of my anger on the weights, the treadmill, the punching bag. My ribs screamed, but I ignored them until I thought I might collapse. The physical pain nearly drowned out the emotional agony. Nearly, but not quite. Eventually, I sank to the floor, drenched in sweat, my breath ragged. A memory shot through me. Amelia's voice, soft in the dark, telling me she wanted us to always be honest with each other, that we'd never let secrets fester, her eyes shining in the glow of the lamp on our nightstand. That was years ago. I pressed my palm to my side, gritting my teeth. The next few days were a blur of small steps. I extended my motel stay. I found a lawyer's number online, though I hadn't called yet. My phone remained mostly off. I turned it on once a day, read the messages, turned it off again. Amelia's texts shifted from frantic worry to desperate pleas. John tried to call, apologized in voicemails, said he'd do anything to fix this. Each time I heard his voice, my chest grew tighter with a combination of hatred and regret. I recognized the risk of letting them stew for too long. John might skip out, or Amelia might do something rash. But that was their problem, not mine. If the house caught fire from their shame, so be it. I wasn't rushing in to save them. I was done being the bystander in my own life. 3 days later, I showed up at the house in the middle of a weekday, certain they'd both be at work. The driveway was empty. I stepped inside, still using my key. The place smelled like lemon cleaner. Someone had been tidying up. The living room looked the same, except John's blanket and pillow were gone. I strode upstairs, rummaged through the dresser, collecting more clothes. From Amelia's closet, I grabbed a couple of personal items that were technically mine. My father's old watch, a small box of letters from college. Then I paused at the bedroom doorway. My bed was made with fresh sheets. The room looked almost staged. That sense of violation rose in me again, but I swallowed it, forcing my legs to move toward the door. Downstairs, I noticed a new photograph on the bookshelf, one of Amelia and John at some event, maybe a work function. They were smiling. My stomach twisted. I took that picture out of the frame, snapped it in half, and let the pieces fall to the floor. No note, no explanation. That was enough. The final piece of my plan was to handle the finances. I found our joint account statements in the desk drawer, took them all, along with my laptop. Then I was done. As I turned to leave, though, a surge of anger hit me, so strong it made me dizzy. This was my home, mine and Amelia's, not John's, and I was walking away from it, from the life I'd built. But then I remembered the scene in the bedroom, the note with the condom reminder, the moan in her throat as she kissed him. The fury receded into cold acceptance. Let them choke on their own guilt here. I locked the door behind me, got in my car, and started the engine. My ribs still hurt, but less than before. Maybe because I was embracing the pain, letting it guide me out of the labyrinth of betrayal. I drove back to the motel, the late afternoon sun cutting bright stripes across the windshield. That evening, I found a quiet bar a few miles away, ordered a whiskey neat, sank into a booth by myself. The old country music drifting from the jukebox did nothing for me, but it filled the silence. I took a sip, let the burn ripple down my throat. Then I noticed my hand, still scuffed from punching that vending machine. A tiny scab had formed, the edges red and raw. I prodded it with my thumb, wincing, but part of me relished the pain. A reminder that I was alive, that I'd survived the first wave of betrayal. The bartender asked if I wanted another drink. I nodded. Might as well. An hour passed. Maybe more. Then my phone vibrated in my pocket. I hesitated, expecting another wave of messages from Amelia or John. But it was a new number. I answered. It was my lawyer contact, calling back about the email I'd sent. He started explaining next steps, how we could approach a separation, how to expedite matters if both parties agreed. My chest tightened. But I listened, gave him the basic details, set up an appointment for the following Monday. When I hung up, I felt a surprising sense of calm. I realized that was the moment I fully committed to leaving Amelia. Perhaps the heartbreak would remain, but I was done clinging to the fantasy of saving our marriage. I downed the last of my whiskey, left a few bills on the table, and walked out. The night air was cool against my flushed skin. Outside, the parking lot was nearly empty, the moon a thin crescent overhead. I leaned against my car, inhaling slowly. The tension in my ribs flared once more, a persistent ache. But behind it, I sensed a strange lightness, like a burden shifting. Maybe revenge was never about confronting them, about humiliating them in a spectacle of anger. Maybe it was about setting myself free from this cycle of pain. Let them drown in their guilt, in their lies. I'd survive. I'd rebuild. I took out my phone, powered it on, and read one last message from Amelia. Wherever you are, please, I need to see you. I'm so sorry. We can fix this. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't reply. I deleted it. Then I blocked her number. Because the last few days taught me something. I'm not perfect. I'm not the hero of some fairy tale. I'm flawed and angry and in serious pain. But at least I'm real. I have my own identity, my own capacity to feel, and no one can take that from me unless I let them. John and Amelia, on the other hand, will devour each other in secrecy. If not now, then soon enough. Lies like that don't stay hidden forever. I slid behind the wheel, turning the key. The engine rumbled to life. A wry half-smile touched my lips, a bitter taste on my tongue. Maybe vengeance is just the act of stepping away, leaving them to their ruin. Maybe vengeance is the emptiness they'll feel when they realize I won't play the part of the cuckolded fool. There won't be a big showdown. No storm of curses, no shattered dishes or police reports, just this silent final exit. And so I drove away from that bar, the motel key in my pocket, my future uncertain. My ribs still hurt, every breath reminding me of the damage done. But with each mile, I felt a fraction lighter, as if the shackles of betrayal were loosening. In time, maybe the ache will heal. I don't expect it to vanish overnight. But I know one truth. I won't let their affair define me. I won't let it turn me into a bitter husk of a man. Their deception isn't my burden to carry anymore. I left it with them. They can keep it. Let it fester in the bed they defiled. And if I ever see them again, if fate somehow brings us into the same orbit, I won't pretend to forgive or forget. But I won't surrender my peace either. I've learned the cost of illusions. I've learned that revenge, real revenge, isn't about retribution. It's about liberation. So, here I am, gripping the wheel at another red light, watching the city fade behind me. I know I'm not perfect, but I'm real. And when the lie finally devours them both, I'll still be here, standing on my own 2 feet, the taste of freedom on my lips. Even if I stand alone, I'll stand as my own truth. And maybe in the quiet that follows, that's what will finally set me free.